always welcome coming back to St. Column's because it's strongly related to my childhood. And of course, if it hadn't been for St. Column's, I couldn't have made the progress that I made in the world because it was the education that I received there. And I always feel the deepest debt of gratitude to my teachers in St. Column's College.
I mean, I meet people all over the world now who were at St. Column's, and, you know, some of them start foaming at the mouth when they start talking about it, you know.
In America, they asked me, would they see that St. Column's and 2 Nobel Prize winners and other kind of achievers in various areas? And they asked me questions like, you know, was it the school for the privileged? Was it the school for the particularly gifted? Was it the expensive school? Was this, that, the other? My answer was it was the only school.
People from Rossville Street and the Bogside generation, which came into St. Column's, had quite a different attitude to the one which was held by St. Colum's as a sort of corporate entity, held by the church. I mean, we were a bit wilder and so on. We certainly weren't as Catholic as the school was, and we were soccer people, not Gaelic football people.
We developed a culture. The culture had stayed with me for a lot of my life, what I call the culture of the 3 S's. The 3 S's were anybody who studied at night was called a stew. Anybody who told on another boy was called a squeak. And anybody who tried to sit in the front seat of the class and talk up to the master was called a suck.
There are some brilliant teachers, civilised, and there are others who are... I mean, to say they're not civilised is really not enough. They're in a sort of crime rampage called a teaching career.
It was a very lonely time, and it's very hard to envisage the situation now as it was then, but it was difficult, and you certainly grew up very quickly.
The British Education Act of 1947 provided free secondary education to Northern Irish children for the first time, opening the school gates to a new generation eager for change. That generation's desire for new horizons meant that the old order could no longer stand. This painful transformation would forge major national and international talents, leading to 2 Nobel Prizes and major achievements in the arts, politics, and diplomacy. This is the story of some of those boys, the school, the city, and their time.
I wrote a poem a while back called In the Afterlife, and I imagined instead of being in the Elysian fields, I'd be walking behind Jim Logue, who was the caretaker, brushing the corridors and going into the haunted absence places like the old refectory and the old corridors, and that this would be a kind of posthumous, strange, ghostly life. Bodies and souls in the afterlife. It will be like following Jim Logue, the caretaker, as he goes to sweep our hair off that classroom floor where the school barber set up once a fortnight, falling into step as he does his rounds, glimmerman of dorms and silent landings, of the refectory with its solid crest-marked delph, the ground floor corridor, the laundry pile, and boots tagged for the cobbler. Was that your name on a label? Were you a body or a soul?
I was born in Derry here in what is now called the Bogside, in an area which was very severely deprived in all sorts of ways, but in which I was perfectly happy. I mean, football, street fights, school, primary school, forever running messages, forever finding a way to try and scrape a few pennies together through selling jam jars. You know, a large jam jar was worth 2p small jam jar was worth 1p down at the rag and picker's shop.
I was born in Lecky Road, right in the heart of what is now called the Bogside. Lecky Road was in a fairly poor and run-down part of Derry, and we lived there for 5 years. And after that, we moved uphill to a more salubrious environment. Once you moved up the hill a bit, it was a much more mixed community. So I was very fortunate as a kid, in that my friends were both Catholics and Protestants.
I was born in Balleek in County Fermanagh. Well, I grew up there. I actually was born in Ballyshannon, but I was only there for a day until my mum brought me home. The family home was in Balleek, right on the border, about 100 yards from the border between what is now called the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And indeed, I've spent most of my life within a few miles of the border.
I mean, we weren't big farmers, but we had space and we had your own house and a sense of independence. And we weren't gang, there was no gang life really. There was kind of plenty of solitude in a way, yeah.
Little terraced house. There were 5 kids. My dad was a cop on the beat in my younger days and then became a plainclothes cop in my teenage years. That would place it about, as I remember it, was about a 15-minute walk or a 10-minute run to St. Column's.
Finally, it's the right time. I'm gonna let them go this time. I'm gonna just walk away into a life that's mine.
Hey, John, how about you, brother?
John? We were waiting on you to make the grand entrance. You see,
I wanted to give you a full walk down the sweet.
What are you doing here?
What am I doing here? I'm here to torment you here. What have I been here for years?
You taught him French.
You taught me all the French I know.
Is Phil Coulter not here?
Coulter is on his way. He's eating his toast.
Star is born, and the rays of moment.
Once upon a time in the West.
You bring the old colours with you?
Dr. Sharkey, a pleasure. Dr. Coulter.
I taught history. That was the main thing.
That's true. We were all brought up to be teachers, but nothing else.
Teachers or priests?
Teachers are priests.
Teachers
I
were the
came
same.
here.
A priest
I-
indeed
I
who said
passed-
you reproduce.
I passed 11 plus in its first year. The introduction to 11 plus transformed the area in many ways. It transformed this college. Because before the 11 plus, the only people who would have attended this college would have been the sons of business and professional people. I was very fortunate that I passed 11 plus in its very first year.
We were 10/11, so you had to buy your blazer and your short grey flannel trousers, and you walked up pride as punch with your blazer and your lovely crest, and everybody knew that you were a successful St. Colum's boy, destined forever for the great things in life. Little did they know what went on in some of the classrooms.
It was made clear to you from the very beginning at the age of 11 that a great deal was now expected of you. You know, that in some way you represented this community, you certainly represented your family, and that you had to make use of this opportunity. You know, we were warned at the age of 11, you know, you must not waste this. Having said that, an awful lot of people, of course, they failed the 11 plus, did very well in life, but it was a stark division at the age of 11.
I was supposed to be smart, and the master put me in for the 11 plus exam, and I remember going to the Rainey School in Marifelt. That was a bit of an outing to a strange room, and sat and did the exam there. It was an intelligence test ahead of time, and then it must have been English and sums and so on. Anyway, I got the 11 plus, and I do remember Master Murphy, before the results came and I got the exam, he got the exam, and Master Murphy calling the class up round the desk and taking a half crown out of his pocket and saying to, now this, he said, this is for this man here. He has got the scholarship and he's going away to Derry, so this is for him getting the exam.
I remember my mother rushing across and kissing me. It was a Saturday morning, I remember it well, sort of, when the letter came. Sort of my mother rushing across to me and kissing me, and so it was a great thing in our house, great thing, and all over the Bogside.
One of the early days of September 1946, I arrived in St. Columns as a boarder for the first time. You were confined to quite a confined space for 3 months. You saw the traffic passing on the street outside through the gates, but you never were on the street. We went in there in the first week of September. We didn't get out on the street until about the 23rd of December, which for an 11-year-old who was used to wandering all over the place in fields and going bicycles to films and different other things was a hugely restricting experience.
It was a sore mark on the soul the day I came to Derry with my father and mother. We're driven there by a friend of my father's. We didn't have a car. My father's friend, Jim McKenna, remember he had a Mayflower car. And we came to the college here in the afternoon, went in and saw the president. My parents, I'm sure I now realise, were out of it too. They were feeling strange. They had absolutely no experience of this kind of thing. College, Derry even, probably hadn't been there before.
Shock, horror, awe, shock. I mean, I had no experience that was going to prepare me for this, like going into a boarding school.
Of course, what I remember most about that day was the moment coming when they had to leave. I stood in the front of junior house on the steps, I remember, and they walked down the path down towards the gates, and that really was a very homesick, sad moment of loss.
Within 2 days of me arriving at the college as an 11-year-old, I had been beaten up 3 or 4 times. I had been forced and goaded into fighting with other boys. I had been taken out and given a ducking, as they called it, where technically speaking you were supposed to be just your head held under the outside tap of the school and get your head wet, but actually it was a very brutal experience. You were jammed against the wall. And the priests would be walking around the walks in the college, you know, reading their breviaries and just totally ignoring all this. You know, this was, you know, nobody was interfering with this. This was a ritual that happened to first years when they came into college.
I remember my very first day, my very first class in St. Columns, which is, I remember being in a class. That was my day one, my first introduction to a class, and there was this priest, who won't mention his name, from rural South Derry, and I was going around asking people, where do you come from? You know, such and such, where do you come from? And he came to me and he said, where do you come from, McCann? I said, I come from Rossville Street. And he immediately shot back, Rossville Street, that's where you just wash once a month. You know, and that was letting me know.
It was made obvious to some of us by some of the teachers that to be from the Bogside, to be from the working class, was a distinct disadvantage, and that, you know, that we shouldn't be here.
Father was astride before us as we went into the hall, for he could hear her sobbing, a sound that moved and wavered in phases, a stripping off of unbearably tight panics that only found more, tighter ones within. I wanted to run away, to flee across Meenan's Park, past the Sunday football games, past the crouching players of marbles and the children on swings with their legs out stiff, past the card players squatting on the broken slabs of the air raid shelters in a pale blue trance of smoke, and on into the shuttered Lecky Road, up the long hill to Bishop Street, down Abercorn Road to the river, and over the bridge into the safety of really foreign territory.
It was a very enclosed place, the Bogside. The church dominated sort of almost all the social life of the Bogside. Many people were engaged in church business sort of almost on a daily basis. I mean, from running fundraising events to helping to run the schools, and almost like a sort of internal, rudimentary social welfare system, you know. I can remember sort of brilliant, concerts going on just for local people, by local people. Wee Willie Doherty could play 2 tunes on the tin whistle, 2 tin whistles out of each side of his mouth. Could play Kevin Barry and the Sash simultaneously. Anyway, very non-sectarian whistler was Willie. And we had terrific singers, we had terrific bands all the time. An awful lot of musical talent came out of the Bogside. Pipe bands and flute bands and brass bands, or all those in the area. And then, of course, people who came from that background at a later stage would graduate into show bands. We had half a dozen show bands running from the Bogside alone.
Derry City was different. I mean, the quick accent, the speed, a different attitude, more cockier and readier to play and wittier and so on. It was just speedier. South Derry was, the country fellas were notoriously kind of slow and deliberate, you know, and the day boys were quicker, definitely, yeah.
These guys were bigger than you, and they could have beat the lining out of you if you kind of confronted them. So you just got smart enough. Don't take them on. You know, you had to be twice as cute. And of course, the Borders would have had this perception of Derry boys as being dead wide. We were the kind of, you know, city boys, and we thought we knew. You know, we thought we were cooler than them and all that kind of stuff.
Borders never came from Derry. Borders were from like Inishowen, Buncrana, you know, Ballinascreen, Gulladuff, Desert Martin, Letterkenny, you know, Omagh. So all the people I associated with weren't Derry people. And the day boys coming in the gate every day and going home to their mummies at night, you know, they were a whole different breed, totally different breed. And you almost didn't allow yourself to associate with them because, you know, you'd start wondering about why you weren't going home to your mummy at night or stuff, you know. So you just kept them at arm's length.
I sat all morning in the college sick bay, counting bells knelling classes to a close. At 2 o'clock our neighbours drove me home. In the porch I met my father crying. He had always taken funerals in his stride, and Big Jim Evans saying it was a hard blow. The baby cooed and laughed and rocked the pram. When I came in and I was embarrassed by old men standing up to shake my hand and tell me they were sorry for my trouble. Whispers informed strangers I was the eldest away at school as my mother held my hand in hers and coughed out angry, tearless sighs. At 10 o'clock, the ambulance arrived, with the corpse stanched and bandaged by the nurses. Next morning I went up into the room. Snowdrops and candles soothed the bedside. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks, paler now. Wearing a poppy bruise on his left temple, he lay in the 4-foot box as in his cot. No gaudy scars, the bumper knocked him clear. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year.
He was brought up to the President's room and told about Christopher having been knocked down and killed. This was the month of February. And we passed a little field, and I don't know why, but I noticed the little field that day in the car going home. And for years and years afterwards, and I passed that field and I noticed it, and it always brought back that moment.
Nobody knows why some of us get broken hearts, and some of us find a world that's clear and bright. You could be packed up and ready, knowing exactly where to go. How come you miss a connection? No use in asking, the answer is nobody knows.
There was a period of 3 years perhaps where I was seriously bullied in St. Colum's by one person. And that was something that I tried to talk about to my parents And they actually went to talk to the president about it. But the vibe that came down from that meeting to me was that, well, you know, I mean, are you sure he isn't exaggerating a little bit? Perhaps, you know? And it was like brushed over. Nothing ever happened from it, you know. This person liked music and had a fascination with me because I was musically talented and wanted me always to play for him. But there was always an implied threat there that if I didn't, he would hit me. It was a really, I mean, a psychiatrist would probably have a name for it immediately, but it was like as if I was this fascinating creature that this person was drawn towards but also wanted to destroy.
Since attending University College Dublin, Paul has become one of Ireland's foremost singer-songwriters. Many artists have performed his songs, including Phil Collins, Joe Cocker, Art Garfunkel and Cher. Bob Dylan called him a secret hero. Bono dubbed him the iron fist in the velvet glove of Irish music. He wrote Paradise Is Here for Tina Turner. He still tours and played a record 23-night sellout concert at Dublin's Vicar Street.
It's still the case at my age that one of my most vivid memories still of St. Column's, I mean, is of when I couldn't have been more than about 12, 13 because I remember I was in short trousers. The reason I remember that sort of was a priest at a teacher at the front of the class, and he had called me out and stroking my thigh sort of and getting an erection. I can't describe, I couldn't put into words how embarrassed I was. I was just frozen sort of with embarrassment, up to the point of tears. Now that's not a terrible sexual assault and so forth, but I remember that to this day, and well, I'm not aware that it did me any great psychic damage, you know, it can't have done me much good either. It was hardly ever talked about. We would giggle and make dirty jokes about some of these teachers, but it was never confronted and certainly wasn't something that you report back to your parents.
Finally, it's the right time. I'm gonna let them go this time. I'm gonna just walk away into a life that's mine. Finally, it's the right time. Sometimes it takes so long to understand the simple things. You know when it's going wrong. You don't need a bell to ring. I spent so many nights playing out of make-believe.
Where are we going? This is the ref. This is what used to be the borders where they used to feed us when they fed us, you know, which wasn't very often.
It was big benches, wasn't it?
No, it was long tables.
I can remember it being like 5 times the size.
Sorry, yeah.
We were about this height, so it looks a lot taller when you're that height. You weren't in here, you were day boys. You were fed at home by your mammies.
Probably.
And tell us about breaking the ice in the morning and washing your face in big lumps of ice.
That's true.
No.
That's what they say. That's what the borders claim.
That's
What
what
I
I
do remember, though, is sneaking in bags of chips that are coming up from music lessons of an evening time.
Oh, yeah.
And then, because there was a chipper just top of
That's right. A hungry lot, South Derry boys.
I'm getting hungry, boys. I have to leave here. You didn't bring any free lunch with you, did you, Phil, when you were coming? No.
You had the usual ideology there about, you know, being hardened by school for the world beyond. The way our hands were hardened by being slapped so often, you know that, and if we soaked them in vinegar, it made them harder. So that, you know, you had these hands with skin that was shiny and tough, and leather straps would bounce off them. Unless the teacher took the trouble, as he often did, to make sure that the leather strap licked up onto the more delicate skin on the wrist, which vinegar didn't harden.
The first day in the big study I've written about this, the terror of the strap, everybody was lined up. I'd never seen such execution, such executive strapping as happened that day. I don't know how people were chosen, but there was a sense of violence and fear in the air.
Looking at some of those teachers and at the trouble they went to, not to teach, but to exert their authority, and to exert their authority through all sorts of conceivable mini tortures, you know, using a sliding blackboard as a guillotine, making boys hold their fingers in a pyramid and then beating the pyramid of fingers with the wooden side of a duster, trying to make the so-called tough boys cry, and then regarding it as a triumph if the boy broke down and cried.
People would say, whisper to you, the doc's on the rip. That meant that the particular priest who was known as the doc, nickname, sort of was in a bad mood. And people, so when you went into that class, I mean, you would sit and literally keep your head down staring at a book and hope that he didn't pick on you, because if he did, sort of, you were in trouble. And some of the punishments that they had, I mean, were, you know, bizarre and sadistic. You know, I remember being made to kneel sort of on the floor, sort of, and take my toes and my legs behind me, sort of keep them up off the ground, and with my hands out in the front of me, so I'm balanced in the fulcrum of the knees, and I say, open your mouth. I put a chalk duster into my mouth, and then would invite me sort of to nod my head and agree that I was a waster, a scoundrel, a no good, who should be out digging ditches and not here in St. Column's wasting teachers' time.
The policeman with his belt, with a baton and a revolver, and the priest with his Roman collar. These were two uniforms that bespoke power, but the thing is, the priest should have known that he had a power in the Roman collar, which should not have been the power of coercion, which the other one was, state coercion of the other. His should have been that of persuasion. But in fact, all these priests ruined their real authority by relying on the strap, which was their baton.
Acclaimed critic and leading academic Seamus Deane was among the first from the Bogside to gain a university degree. The general editor of James Joyce's work for Penguin and a founding director of Field Day, he was also the editor of the Field Day anthology. He holds the chair of Irish Studies at Notre Dame University, Illinois. He's a widely read poet. His novel, Reading in the Dark, was shortlisted for the Booker Prize and won the Whitbread Prize.
Looking back on it, I think that some of the priests were clinically insane. I really do. You know, and they were obviously very frustrated people. I understand them better now, and indeed I've met in subsequent years some of the priests, particularly priests whom I hated when I was at St. Columb, and got to talk to them, and then I realised sort of these were lonely people, and some of them have become priests just because their parents had pushed them into it, or they couldn't think of anything else to do, or whatever, or it was an approved career path if you were a young Catholic, sort of, and they became priests and lived in an all-male Catholic environment through secondary school, Maynooth, then back to teach in the school, which would just, I mean, what a narrow life to have.
Well, this is, I suppose, this I remember exactly.
Yeah. That hasn't changed a lot, has it?
No, that's exactly as I remember.
We've been the same for 2,000 years. Wow.
Remember that? I do, indeed. Organ still there.
This is where the retreat was.
That's just exactly what I said to him. This is what I do remember.
And the Redemptorists.
The fire and brimstone.
I think my first public display of politics was, he gave us a lecture during something about Elvis Presley, the evils of Elvis Presley, and the fact that Presley was a dissolute, degenerate person and so on. And at a moment of madness, I was sitting back here. I put my hand up and said, but I don't think he should be attacking Elvis when he's not here to defend himself.
He did not. St. Colum's was a minor seminary. It was set up really to send priests either to the Derry diocese or to the missions or whatever it might be. And there was that kind of expectation as well that the bright students who had kept their nose clean for the 5 or 6 years they were encouraged to think about a vocation, you know, as I did. I mean, it was sort of in the whole ethos of the place. Fortunately, it became obvious to me that that was not my route.
I wonder if one day what you say what you care if you say you love me madly, I'd gladly be there like a puppet on a string.
Phil Coulter left Queen's University for London's Tin Pan Alley in 1965. He's written and produced for Van Morrison, Sinead O'Connor, the Bay City Rollers and Elvis Presley. His album, Classic Tranquility, is Ireland's biggest selling album. He's been awarded 23 platinum and 42 gold albums.
I have to say that the books I read with Sean B. O'Kelly, in sixth form especially, we had a very special class, Seamus Deane, Paddy Malarkey, Michael Cassoni and myself. Basically it was almost like a first-year university seminar for, 4 or 5 days a week for a year. And the authors I read with him at that time really very deeply lodged in terms of knowing things by heart.